very warm welcome to our conversation today. Let's talk about heroic myths from a comparative perspective. Within this theme, what I aimed to develop was to take some classic myths and look for recurring elements among them, in other words, facts that consistently repeat. I know you'll remember that Joseph Campbell already did this when he created his monomyth structure. And indeed, we'll even talk about that. He captures many interesting and recurring elements within that monomyth structure, which some of you might already be familiar with. I looked for other elements beyond those, other passages that are very recurrent. In other words, repetitive situations in heroic myths. Not just to compare them with each other, because that might not have much purpose for us, but to compare them with ourselves. How these episodes can somehow repeat within our own lives. It's evident that heroic myths all share a similar thread among themselves. They are a reference point, a pursuit for humanity as a whole. What is sometimes not clear to us is how we can bring these myths into our own lives. What can each fantastic situation shown there teach us as human beings? A Hercules who confronts various monsters, what can that say to a human being? Those who confront their enemies, those who triumph in battle. What does this mean in the life of an ordinary person, who neither encounters any monsters nor is in battle? What can this say in the life of the everyday hero, which is what each of us should strive to be? Therefore, I will make this comparison, and I hope it proves beneficial for you. May you draw inspiring elements from this, which is our intention. Shall we get started then? Let's begin. Talking about the hero as a reference point. There is a quote by Epictetus, the great Stoic philosopher, where he says that the seeds of greatness within us need an image to blossom and germinate. It's really like this. It's as if there's a sculptor who sees an image, a person sitting, and then comes to the stone and starts removing everything that doesn't belong to a human being and a chair. He begins to extract, as Michelangelo used to say, what remains. He begins to sculpt the stone according to his model. And so it is in life, we have a model and we sculpt ourselves based on that model. If we don't have a model, we will work on ourselves randomly, according to various fashion elements, according to various current elements in our historical moment, which are not always worthy of being imitated. Therefore, it is very common for philosophers to talk about this. Plato himself recommended always having a hero in mind, a hero who would be your inspiration throughout your life. It can be a hero of historical character or a hero of personal character as well. A father, a grandfather, an exemplary person who has been part of your life. But it's very important to have this model, because whether we know it or not, we are sculpting ourselves every day, and we must be aware of what our reference points are. Pause to take a look at the fashion references and realize how many of them are not worthy of being imitated. But nature does not allow vacuums. If you don't choose your model, you will unconsciously adopt the models of fashion and begin to work on yourself in a very inadequate way. And one fine day, you are confronted with a work that has been done on you, which has nothing to do with what you would have wished for. An entire construction you wouldn't have wanted to make. Why? We leave this space open. We don't choose what we will mirror ourselves on. This is fundamental. And myths, then, they have a sort of trajectory. Imagine a staircase. Imagine that the human being, from the point where we are to an ideal human, to the ultimate purpose of the human condition, there are several steps, and conditions to step on these steps. And it's as if the mythical trajectories were an example of each of these steps. How to step onto the second, third, fourth step, the necessary trials for that, how to consolidate your position on that step. In other words, it's as if someone had left a map showing how to reach the heights, the fullness of the human condition. Therefore, myths never depict absolutely perfect beings, but beings distant enough from us to serve as reference points, but close enough to us for us to say, if so and so made it, I can too. If so and so made it, I can too. Therefore, they are a very interesting directional reference. Sometimes within a culture, generally, there is a reference to a perfect being, usually connected to a religion. This perfect being is very difficult for us to compare ourselves to. It's very distant. But when we have a hero, they are close enough for you to say, oh, if they did it, I can do it too. If it's possible for him, it's possible for me too. Therefore, it has a measured and appropriate distance, not so far and not so close that it can't serve as a reference. Therefore, it is a powerful and important factor in the lives of human beings as a whole. It's important to cultivate the memory of heroes. Campbell and the monomyth. It's a very classic image, this circle of Campbell's monomyth, which almost everyone knows today, where he outlines the stages of a mythical journey, using various journeys he took as comparisons. So the hero is living an ordinary life and at a certain moment receives a call, resists, doesn't want to answer it. A master, an instructor, a guide appears. Then he recognizes his friends and enemies. Then he begins to go through his first trial, resists, goes through the greatest ordeal. After that, he begins the return home. As if it were a rebirth, he returns to the starting point, but now renewed, greater than he was when he left, like a spiral that returns to its starting point, but at a higher level of consciousness. This scheme by Joseph Campbell is quite interesting. He uses exhaustion to be able to examine all the myths, all the historical trajectories he sets out to analyze. Above all, The Hero with 1,000 Faces is a book entirely focused on this subject. I highly recommend it. It's a good book. But we are going to take, as I mentioned, some things beyond what the monomyth says. Elements that are very common in heroic journeys. When we start talking, we'll remember several. And let's see how this applies to our case. Let's see, for example, call to adventure. Very similar to what Campbell says. In short, the hero faces trials and returns greater than when he left. In other words, he is called to face trials. And we can observe that in our lives, we too are called to face trials. It seems that we came into the world to grow as human beings, to leave here greater than we were before. Therefore, we enter precisely so that our points of failure, our flaws are challenged so that we can work on them. And by working on them, we leave here greater than when we entered. Therefore, it's as if stepping into life means stepping into a territory where trials will inevitably come. And it highlights something, just as heroes understand this. It's necessary to see difficulties as trials. And when we accept them in this way, they become much easier. When we see trials as injustice, when we view adversities as a kind of bad luck or something random, we feel wronged. When we see them as trials, we feel tested to reach another level of consciousness, to achieve another degree of opportunity, another step up. And this makes it much easier to face the trials. So, what can we generally say about the heroic journey? He sets out for trials and returns victorious. He starts off one size and returns larger than he was. Life should be like that for us too. We start off one size, and when we get to the other side, we're bigger than we were when we arrived. We come closer to our human condition. Another quite recurring element, almost every myth has it. The hero is the child of a god and a mortal, or vice versa, a goddess and a mortal. As is the case with Aeneas, for example, who is the son of Venus herself. In other words, always a blend between the divine and the human. And this blend makes him grand and capable of performing wonders, able to achieve extraordinary feats. Now, look closely. It's not that the hero is the child of a goddess and a mortal, or a god and a mortal, and that's why he is superior. We are all children of a god and a mortal. And what happens is that the hero has become aware of this, and we have not yet. We are all children of the sky and the earth, of the spiritual plane and the material plane. We were created by Father and Mother, the Father Spirit, the Mother Matter, who come together to form what constitutes a human personality. All beings are like this. We simply don't embrace it well. We don't recognize our Father. We are very much identified with the earthly plane. An earthly plane not illuminated by the Spirit, not connected with the Spirit, corrupts it, distances it from its true nature. When we have some contact of consciousness with being, some level of perception of our essence, some level of perception of something beyond mere appearance, beyond mere existence, we become exactly what these heroes are. We become children of the divine and the material, of the divine and the human. And this gives us an extraordinary dimension. In other words, it's not just the hero who has this condition. We all have it. What we need is simply to become aware of it. This is very important to realize. The condition of the hero is simply a state of awareness of what he has always been, of what we have always been and always will be, children of sky and earth. So, it's important to be aware of this point, which is a very significant aspect in the life of the hero. What else? At a certain point, he distances himself from the nest, from his parents, from that safe place where he was, which is the departure, according to Campbell, the departure for his mythical journey. We move away from this point of security and take on our responsibilities in the world. And it's the moment when he sets out on his journey, on his heroic quest. Alone, he doesn't take dad, mom, or anyone to protect him. He sets out alone on his heroic quest. Take responsibility for his own life. You see, this point is tremendous and extremely important in the life of any human being. For any of us who aspire to be an everyday hero, the moment we roll up our sleeves and take responsibility for our own lives, what happens to us is nobody else's problem, it's our own. There's no one who will solve it for us. It's up to us. It's like entering a psychological maturity, because we enter physical maturity at the right time when nature dictates. But we only enter psychological maturity when we choose to. The human clock is different from the mechanical clock of nature. We enter adulthood from a psychological standpoint when we choose to enter when we want to enter. And then we start to take the reins of our life, the responsibility for our life. We don't outsource blame. I often refer to the theory of responsibility, that phrase by Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, when he says, "Nothing happens to a man that is not characteristic of man." What did Marcus Aurelius mean with that phrase, which I often call the theory of responsibility? We came into the world to grow as human beings. It's as if we came with an encrypted card listing our flaws. And these flaws attract challenges that come to work on them, to polish them, to see if we can correct them. We come with our flaws, and our flaws attract to us the factors, people, and situations that will test us so we can smooth out those sharp edges. Therefore, people have problems because it's the best they have managed to be. But they come into our lives because we called them. If it weren't this person, it would be another. But I would have to go through this circumstance because I need it. If it weren't this life situation, it would be another. But I would need to go through it because I need that experience. Therefore, I am responsible for my life. I am responsible for what happens to me. And then I really start to roll up my sleeves and work on solving my problems, instead of shifting blame to others and getting complacent. Once again, within Stoicism, Epictetus used to say that the extinction of blame marks the beginning of moral progress. It's that moment when we take responsibility and stand as adults before life, ready to take responsibility for our lives, ready to solve our problems without outsourcing them, without looking for scapegoats, without getting complacent. This is the heroic moment. It is the starting point of the heroic myth, which often takes a long time to happen in our lives. Many times we delay this starting point too much. When will I take the reins of my life, taking on my responsibilities, and take on life as my responsibility? Like everything that happens to me is directed towards me and not a mere coincidence or an injustice or whatever, but everything destined for me. So, this is a crucial moment in the heroic journey and also in our lives. He accepts the authority of those who hold knowledge. So, whether it's a master or an instructor, he accepts the authority of someone who presents themselves as solid, greater, a reference point. In other words, it's very common throughout history, as you can see in the Bhagavad Gita, which is a timeless classic, Arjuna, the great Pandava prince, accepting Krishna as his guide. In the myth of King Arthur, Arthur accepting Merlin, it's very common to have this master or instructor who is accepted as the guide on the path. In other words, The hero accepts to follow all the life experience that has already been accumulated. He accepts and recognizes wisdom and is able to be guided by it. It's like imagining you have a health problem, and instead of seeking a doctor who has studied and prepared for this, you decide to take care of your own health. Wouldn't that be at least irresponsible? No one would do that. Why? I need someone prepared for this. If I had a big, modern, flat-screen TV and it broke down, I would look for a trained technician to fix it. I wouldn't mess with it and risk losing my device. I can't afford to do that. However, when it comes to life, we all consider ourselves experts. And sometimes, in the midst of adolescence, we think we already know everything and don't need anyone's advice. There have been many people throughout history who knew how to live and who left their learning recorded in history. Sometimes, within our own lives, we can find someone who knows how to live better than we do, took 2 or 3 steps beyond ours. They can already be a reference point to accept with humility, to learn from those who know more than we do in the art of living humanely well. This is also a fundamental characteristic. The vanity and arrogance of man make him believe that he is the best and that no one knows more about his life than he does. While the art of living is something that holds many similarities among all human beings, it's something that can be known, and many knew how to live well. And even in our days, it's quite possible that there is someone who knows, not perfectly, but a little better than you, how to face the art of living with sobriety and wisdom. So, this is yet another element of the heroic journey, extremely important as a reference point. Many myths have this, the hero accepting a mentor, a guide. What else can we take as a recurring reference in myths? Heroes always act ethically, meaning for a hero, the ends do not justify the means. He will not resort to low blows, betrayal, or use deceitful tactics or anything of that sort of bad character to bring down his adversaries. He will never use things that contradict his purpose. The hero is coherent and integral. He doesn't believe that the ends justify the means. Everything in him is aligned. He is fair at every stage of the process. He does not allow himself to be corrupted along the way. Of course, this is an extremely important reference point for us. Many times we adopt this Machiavellian legacy that the ends justify the means, when in reality, we know that if ends and means are not coherent, we will not achieve those ends we dream of. We cannot serve 2 masters at the same time, as the biblical teaching says. Either you serve justice or you don't serve justice. The ends and the means must always be coherent, and we shouldn't think that to obtain a certain thing, anything goes. Anything goes, it's too high a price to pay. And you won't achieve that thing. You'll end up with an outcome as corrupted as your means. Therefore, be careful because this mindset is more common than it seems. In our society, in our social circles, in the schemes used to achieve success, it's very common to have this mindset. This is completely contradictory to the myth of the hero. Ends and means always together, just always integral, always united in the sense of being of the same nature. It's important to emphasize this. Ends do not justify means under any circumstances. The hero is the one who is capable of banishing hatred as a motivation. He does not act driven by hatred. He acts out of a sense of collaboration, of justice. Sooner or later, when we use hatred as a means, it will escape our control and dominate our lives. The hero never accepts acting out of hatred. He acts for justice. Sometimes with a wrong that wasn't even directed at him, but was caused by others for others. But he understands that it is noble, just, and good, and he puts his sword in service of this cause, this just cause. He does not act out of revenge. It's one of the things we most need to learn. St. Augustine used to say that revenge is always immoral, and deep down it's always an act of unconscious atheism. In other words, we trust that the universe, the cosmos, has an order between cause and effect, so why do I need to interfere after the causes for the effect to occur? This is part of life, part of nature. Now, when I believe that the universe is chaos, that there is no order between causes and consequences, no compensation, what is called karma in the East, no karma compensation for what has been done, I think that if I don't step in and take revenge, it will go unpunished. And this, deep down, is a distrust in the harmony of the universe. It's a kind of unconscious atheism. It's very common in our culture for certain trendy movies to be quite normal. The hero, in quotes, the idol of the movie, has a certain antagonist who comes along, kills his wife, kills his children, kills his family, and he goes mad with rage, and the whole movie is about him seeking revenge. For him to kill that villain, for him to get his revenge, and everyone cheering for his hatred. Everyone rooting for his hatred to prevail. It's a highly detrimental, pernicious type of culture that makes us admire someone who is driven by hatred, which is a terrible thing. Because when we are driven by hatred, sooner or later, we become its slaves. And we won't be able to move by anything else. We will develop the habit of always moving through anger, always through hatred, which is the worst thing that can happen to a human being. It is complete dehumanization. Therefore, a true hero does not accept morbid justifications or motivations. The justification and motivation for his heroic deed will always be a just cause, a noble cause, a cause in which he finds reason to dedicate his efforts. Something he is not ashamed of, something humanistic. So, never hatred within a classic heroic deed. Be careful with the stories. Sometimes we even see this in cartoons for our children. Be cautious of these stories where hatred is used as a means, where hatred is used as motivation. That's not how a heroic deed works. We will never be everyday heroes motivated in this way. Fraternity. This is extremely important. The hero does not act out of self-interest. The hero always acts to benefit a group of people larger than himself. It's a kingdom. It's your kingdom. Camelot for King Arthur. They are all the Pandavas to Arjuna. Freeing humanity from various fierce monsters in the case of Hercules, there is always a group of beneficiaries much larger than himself. He does not act solely out of personal interests. All of his decisions have a touch of fraternity. They benefit a group much larger than themselves. He is always, in some way, the savior of the homeland, the savior of a particular community, of a group of human beings whom he comes to rescue. It may seem difficult to apply this to our lives. It may seem distant. But if you stop to think, every decision we make, each one of them, immediately brings a solution to our mind, a decision. You pause and question, is this the best just for me? Or is this something that benefits a larger group of people beyond just myself? In other words, there is one more person benefited, one more group of people benefited, the maximum number of people I can benefit with this decision exists. So I prefer this decision, which instead of favoring just myself, will benefit a larger group of human beings. I prefer the decision that is more fraternal, that reaches the greatest number of people with its effects. It's not hard for us to stop and imagine, folks. Do a little exercise of imagination. Imagine a world where people always act this way, making decisions that don't just benefit yourself, but the largest possible group of people. Let me take advantage of everything. No, when I take advantage of everything, many suffer losses in everything, and I don't want that. I don't want to rise on the failure and loss of others. I want my decision to benefit as many as possible. This simple transformation, I assure you, would change the world we live in overnight, in a wonderful way, if we were able to do it. Therefore, it's something from our daily lives, something fundamental, foundational, which is also inspired by the hero's journey, the heroic saga, and is part of the everyday hero's journey. We can learn a lot from myths, and there lies a teaching that is precious. What else do we have from the hero? His arrival is often foretold by a prophecy, by a legend, and so on. In other words, there's almost a suspense. Everyone is waiting for him. Life is waiting for him. This is very common. It's expected that a savior hero will come. Even in fairy tales, the king is there, waiting for a prince to come and save his daughter, who is imprisoned by a witch, by a dragon. Everyone awaits the arrival of the hero. There is a prophecy, there is a legend that foretells he will come. And there's this expectation in the air. The same thing happens in relation to the human being, to our human condition. It's as if you imagined, as I often say, that nature needs a plant. Plants show up and do what is expected of them. They perform photosynthesis, exchange gases with the environment, are the base of the food chain, doing what pertains to them. Nature needs an animal. Animals show up and exercise their survival instinct, their instinct to perpetuate the species, doing what is expected of them. Nature needs a human. Man should be able to show up and exercise values, virtues, and wisdom in their fullness, in the best possible way. In this way, nature expects this from us. We were made as human beings for this, to say present. Therefore, nature waits. It is something promised. It is something within the realm of nature's hopes. It made us for this. Therefore, there is almost an announcement, a prophecy that says, one day the humans will come. One day, the true human beings will come, and all this disorder will cease. On the day a complete and integral human being arrives, this disorder will begin to come to an end. So, this hovers in nature, an expectation for each of us to fulfill as a human being. We are also announced, we are also awaited. There is an expectation for each of us to reach what we are meant to achieve. Honoring your human condition, that for which we were made. In the same way as in heroic deeds, this also exists in our lives. The hero performs wonders thanks to his noble birth. In other words, he is the son of a king, a god, etc. As we've mentioned, often the son of a god or goddess, if not the son of a king who for some reason has distanced himself from his father. And he has the ability to perform wonders precisely because of his special birth. He is a noble and doesn't know it. And we, as we just mentioned, almost as a continuation of what we just talked about, must also recognize the nobility of being born as human beings, which is a noble condition to imagine everything that being a human implies. It is as if it were the pinnacle of nature's construction, a being with reflective consciousness, a being that sees itself, sees life, sees death, understands the functioning of fantastic things around it, a tiny being understanding the birth of galaxies, understanding the movement of the stars in the sky, a tiny being that is capable of asking itself what intelligence is, what goodness is, what life is. The human being is an extraordinary creature. Therefore, we have nobility by birth. Being born as human beings is an honor. It makes us like kings on earth, with the ability we have to benefit the world around us, to benefit nature, to benefit ourselves. Therefore, we should also honor this nobility of our birth. The hero is a noble. Every human being is as well. The fact of being human should give him a certain healthy pride in his condition. It's also possible for pride to be healthy because it gives us dignity. Healthy pride makes us worthy of what we are meant to be. That's exactly what we need to develop. A human being is a very special creature. Let me honor this condition. Let me live up to what it means to be a human being. Another characteristic unique to heroes. This is the most common of all. He faces monsters. How does he face monsters? They are all either human monsters or actual monsters, bizarre animals of all kinds. There you have the myth of the 12 labors of Hercules, where you find monsters of all kinds. You'll see many types: Orpheus, Theseus, Perseus, and many others. Facing monsters, whether human or animal, all of them confronting this monstrosity. What is this monstrosity? What are the monsters that an everyday hero would have to face? The very little monsters that live within us. And then I explain a bit to you, reiterating something many of us have already discussed in our talks about the 3 medieval alchemical works. We have to accomplish the 3 works within ourselves. The first of these is the work in black, which is to dive deep within ourselves, to delve into the roots of our consciousness and recognize all the little creatures that live inside us and that dominate us. So we have instincts, impulses, uncontrolled passions, unchecked vanity, various vices, all those little creatures that are in there, and they tyrannize us because we are not aware of them. And when we are not aware of things, they dominate us. And these little creatures are not evil. Their energy was made to benefit us. But the thing is, they need to be tamed to obey us. It's the difference between a wild animal and a domesticated one, which can serve our purposes, which can align with what we intend to do. Therefore, all these animals in our subconscious, all these elements that are straining our lives, if we learn to see them, recognize them, and gain authority over them, they become something positive. For example, when you are very stubborn. My grandmother used to say I was as stubborn as a lame mule. I always repeat this passage because I find it hilarious. I can't imagine what is being a lame mule. Maybe because it is more stubborn than other animals. But I find it curious because stubbornness, when worked on, can actually become an extraordinary determination. An uncontrolled passion. If controlled, it can transform into an extraordinary enthusiasm. And they are strong virtues. They are important. When you redirect the energy of these little creatures to be under your control, they become very positive energies. But they need to be seen and controlled. The worst thing that can happen is when we don't see a monster and turn our backs on it. Because it dominates us, it attacks us from behind, completely unprepared. When I have a tendency towards laziness and I know it, I will be on guard against it all the time. But I get offended when they tell me I'm lazy. I don't see it that way at all. I'll be dominated by it anyway. Therefore, confronting and mastering the little monsters within us is essential for us to move on to the next alchemical work, which is the work in white, which is precisely purification, the mastery of everything that lives within us. After that comes the work in yellow, which is maturity, the citrinitas, the acknowledgement of all these little monsters that exist in the universe, which are also represented within us. This gives us great compassion and great wisdom to deal with them on the outside. And finally, the elevation, which is the work in red, the Beto, which is spirituality, is wisdom. In medieval alchemy, what was shown was a path for consciousness to ascend. Carl Jung talks a lot about this. A path through which consciousness must travel to reach its fullness. Therefore, the first thing is to confront our monsters. They are monsters because they were left loose, randomly, dominating and devouring our lives. That's why they become monsters. Tamed, they can serve us. That's exactly how it is. If you take, for example, the Egyptian myth, when Horus goes to avenge his father Osiris, who was killed by Seth. When he defeats Set, he doesn't kill. He doesn't kill his enemy. Seth was a furious being, therefore he had a lot of energy. All that fury of his, he channels to blow the god's bark. Because that fury of his turns into a great breath to produce wind, to blow the god's bark. In other words, it's as if he took that Seth living inside him and turned that fury into a positive drive. This force of anger, of hatred, into a positive impulse of energy, of propulsion, of movement. He doesn't eliminate. There's no way to eliminate anything that lives within us. There is a way to integrate healthfully by confronting and taming our little domestic monsters. We all have to do this. Otherwise, we become enslaved by them throughout our lives, which is very common to happen. Stop to think. The bad attitudes, the bad decisions you've made in life, wasn't it the little monster that was in charge? Most of the time, it was the little monster that was in charge. So, how much has it already devoured from your life? Be mindful of this. The everyday hero is always vigilant in mastering these shadows, these little monsters that live within him. In other words, this is part of the heroic journey. The hero is willing to give his life in the name of something greater. And this is very interesting. In general, they dedicate their lives to the service of something they consider noble, just, and good. It's common in all myths. They all take high risks. They all commit themselves with an enthusiasm that can come at a high cost. And we know this. And how can we dedicate our lives? Does it mean creating a self-destructive habit? No, it doesn't mean that. It means every day dedicating our lives today to something we see as noble, just, and good, always striving to refine our sense of what is noble, what is just, and what is good, to get ever closer to a universal value. When you arrive at night, look back at your day and say, "Today, I was genuinely human. Everything I did aligned with my criteria of justice, kindness, and nobility. Everything I did was worthy of a human being." And then I can sleep in peace with heaven and earth. What I call the sleep of the just. I can surrender to the sleep of the just. Why? Because I earned today as a human being. In other words, I dedicated my life today to the humanist ideal. Every day, I am dedicating my life to the humanist ideal. When you look, you are moving forward, experiencing growth. As time goes by, you realize that you are no longer the same, and that is the greatest source of satisfaction and happiness a person can have. Realizing that you are overcoming challenges, leaving trials behind. Pay attention to this, it's very important. Otherwise, our time passes in vain. How many times do we reach December 31st and analyze what we've accomplished from our last year's plan, how much we've changed? And we have the sadness of realizing that we haven't changed at all. That's terrible. It means a significant part of our life where we haven't taken a step upward. A year in our life is not insignificant. A significant part of our life is when we don't take a step towards the light. We are not dedicating, we are not committing our lives to something greater. And you give yourself like this day by day in a constant battle to always light up a little more. And this is the heroic journey of our everyday hero, what we strive to be or what we should strive to be. A hero does not boast about their achievements. He is not vain, he is not arrogant. He offers the fruit to the one who provided him with the fruit. It's what happens, once again going back to the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna with Krishna. When he accomplishes his deed, the deed is a product of Krishna, a product of the divine. He places it at his feet. Give the act cleansed of expectation and selfishness. Act simply for the soul. Work and accomplish for me. It's Krishna speaking to Arjuna. Give me the act. Work and accomplish for me. Focus your attention on the soul. This is fundamental. Where did the inspiration come from for us to be who we are? From something sacred, from something that is above us. Therefore, it is only fair that when we achieve some fruit, we also dedicate it to the source from which our inspiration came. Let's not think, I did it and I am the great one. No, I serve something greater than myself. And here are the fruits which I could not have achieved alone. I succeeded in the name of, through, something greater than myself. Therefore, I am not good, grand, or better than anything or anyone. I simply knew how to serve effectively. May I continue to know how to serve effectively. One of the things that most corrupts a human being is precisely making an effort to pass a test. Winning automatically is seized by selfishness, vanity, and arrogance. This prevents him from taking the next step. You'll spend your whole life holding that trophy in your hand and thinking that he has already done enough for his life, and thinking that this was his achievement alone and no one else's. All our inspiration comes from this world of ideas, this spiritual world. May the fruits return there. May they be delivered back there. May we then be able to offer, to dedicate these fruits to something greater. Let's not be trapped by pride, arrogance, and vanity. This is typical of the heroic journey. You don't see any hero boasting about what he has done. He knows that he served something greater. Respect and chivalry towards the princess. Look how interesting. You will see many heroes, like St. George and others, fairy tale princes, the way they conduct themselves. He is going to save a princess, save a young woman. But he treats this young woman with absolute respect. He doesn't let his instincts get the better of him. His interactions in general are marked by respect and chivalry towards other human beings. He does not take advantage of other human beings. He does not act by taking human beings as means, but always as an end in themselves. He is incapable of taking advantage of others in a relationship. He is incapable of being disrespectful to others in any interaction, unless he is on a heroic quest and truly needs to remove an obstacle from the path. The hero's goal is to reach a just end. The antagonist must be removed from the path with minimal harm so that he does not interfere. But he will not be treated with excessive cruelty, with excessive malice, beyond what is necessary. He will not be tortured, nor subjected to anything beyond what is necessary. He possesses this chivalry, this respect for all beings that cross his path. He is noble in his treatment. He knows how to regard another human being as an end in themselves, not as a means. I repeat that phrase from Kant in the groundwork of the Metaphysics of Morals, where he says it is immoral to treat a rational being as a means. He is always an end in himself. The hero embodies this kind of treatment. He is not capable of dishonoring a princess, no matter how beautiful she is, no matter how vulnerable she may be. He always maintains control over his instincts. He accomplished his work in darkness. He defeated the monsters back there, at the beginning of the heroic journey. And here he always stands tall, the human mastering the animal within. The work in white accomplished, and perhaps even a bit of the work in red completed. In other words, he masters himself, he is self-assured, he respects, he possesses the nobility inherent to a human being. In his interactions, compassion for the weak and frail. So, you will see in many stories, whether myths or fairy tales, many times a bird appears along the way, perhaps struck by an arrow. The hero dismounts from his horse, goes over, and carefully removes that arrow. A person who has suffered something, he goes down there, attends to that person, or gives a bit of water to an elderly man who is thirsty, and from that he receives a very special gift. He doesn't do it to receive something in return. He does it out of mercy, out of compassion. Perhaps he has a princess up ahead who needs to be saved from a dragon. Perhaps he has a kingdom to rescue. There are important things ahead. But he is not insensitive to the pains he encounters along the way. He is sensitive to the pain of others, and this is a clearly fundamental element in our lives. We must not take a step insensitive to the pain of others. There is a quote from the great 19th century thinker, Helena Blavatsky, where she says, "Do not let the tear that runs down your face dry before the tear that runs down the face of the last of mortals has dried." It doesn't mean that you walk the path torturing yourself. Joy is necessary, happiness is necessary. But it is also necessary that we do not forget the pain of others, so that we commit to always moving forward. The other awaits me in the future. The other needs me to grow, so I can rescue them at the right moment. Dedicating and committing oneself to the pain of others is what ensures that I will always keep moving, because the forces of inertia pull me backward. The only thing strong enough to counteract these forces of inertia and propel me forward is love. Someone will suffer if I stay here. Someone will experience terrible pain, and I wouldn't be able to help if I surrender to inertia. If I make a concession to my laziness at this moment, I won't be at a destined meeting with someone in the future. I will not assist this person in a moment of agony, in a moment of suffering. Human pain is too high a price for us to pay, and usually we can't bear to pay it and keep moving forward. In other words, being committed to human suffering. And always, in a certain way, use this as a drive to keep moving forward. To the best of my abilities, within what I can and will be able to do because I am growing, within what I can do now and what I will be able to do someday. I will minimize and dry these tears. By addressing the causes of pain, sometimes dealing with the consequences, and acting intelligently, I will always be committed to human suffering and will not be insensitive to it. I will strive to do the utmost within my capabilities to alleviate it in some way. This compassion that accompanies us throughout our lives transforms us into very special beings. Beings who do not ignore the life around them. Beings who have a great capacity to integrate with nature, with life as a whole. Beings that are organic, participating in life as if it were one great living body. They are committed to all aspects of life. When we find a cell within our body that doesn't commit to the body as a whole, we know it's dangerous. It can influence other cells and form a tumor in no time, something very negative and harmful to the body. In other words, beware of selfish behavior. In a certain way, it is always self-destructive. In other words, always altruistic and committed to the pain of the whole. This is the hero's journey. That's how he walks. No matter how rushed and anxious he may be, because there's something important ahead, he does not ignore the pains along the way. He does not ignore the righteous actions he must take along the way. Then you see the heroes, like Hercules himself and others, along the path of their heroic journey, solving a bunch of small problems for communities and places they pass through. The same goes for King Arthur's knights. His sword was always in service of what was just. Anywhere, whoever it might be. He believes in and loves goodness. That's very interesting. He is in service of the good. He believes in a universal good. He places his sword, as we mentioned, in service of this good. He works for the agents of good, regardless of whether they are his friends or not. So there's a distant kingdom that is being attacked by a group of people who want to destroy it, want to rob it, want to massacre it. What do I have to do with this distant kingdom? He is not my friend, not my acquaintance. I know nothing about him, yet I still place my sword at his service. Why? Because I am always an agent of good. It's not because I like someone, he's my friend, let me defend him. No, I am an agent of good. And always, within the reach of my sword, it will be in service of the good. It's not for personal peculiarities or affinities. It's because I am a servant of the good. Whatever the circumstance that presents itself, I realize that an injustice is being committed, and it's within my reach to do something about it. I am in service of the good wherever it manifests, wherever it presents itself. In other words, I feel that what guides me in life is the idea of the good, which, following Plato, is the source of all other virtues. The idea of the good is akin to the very figure of God. It is the greatest good we can achieve in our lives. It is the greatest good that the universe can achieve in its course. This is my driving force. That is where I am headed. And this is a beautiful trait in a hero, and it grants him the honor that makes us admire him. So, a child stands before a hero. Wow, how good he is, and admires him. Later, in adolescence, we want to be heroes. This is the magnetism of a hero. That's why he is so appealing. We know that there is an agent of good. He is highly trustworthy, he is highly just, he is someone we are willing to follow. He is someone who could lead us, and we would trust him. Why? Because he is a servant of the good. And this is easily recognizable. So, what can we conclude from our entire conversation? We are also everyday heroes. We can be. All the tools, all the situations that present themselves to a hero are nothing more than a mythification of what is presented to man, so that he too can become an everyday hero. There are dragons, there are monsters, there are difficulties of all kinds, there are alienations, there are our little domestic habits that prevent us from awakening and being noble. Sometimes there is distraction, inertia, there is selfishness, there are all these things to confront every day. And we must be vigilant every day because the battle can present itself at any moment. We are fighting inch by inch to win and push our trench further ahead. Today, I won't go to sleep without pushing my trench a little further ahead. I am a bit more capable of fighting for my integrity than I was yesterday. I am a bit more capable of being worthy of the human condition than I was yesterday. I pushed, even if just a little, my trench forward. And I am gaining inch by inch the territory of my life. This is typical of the everyday hero, who is as worthy as a mythical hero. You look at a man who is worthy, who has been an everyday hero, or who is an everyday hero, and he has an extraordinary charisma. He inspires respect. He is a reference point. He is an example, and humanity greatly needs examples to shape itself. It greatly needs everyday heroes. All the heroics in history were motivated by these great heroes who served as reference points, whether mythical heroes, historical heroes, or personal heroes. But the great deeds of man had a reference point. In the concrete life of the concrete man, all the everyday heroes that have existed had a reference point. And it's very important that we recognize this need, the need to adapt this heroic journey to our lives, so that we can be what an everyday hero is, a life that is highly motivated, lucid, coherent, and ascending. Motivated, lucid, coherent, and ascending from the perspective of consciousness. And so may our journey be. May we understand that myths are lived. They are not mere coincidences or just inspirations to lull children to sleep. Quite the opposite. Some are too powerful to lull children to sleep. They are meant to awaken adults. May we be able to use them for that purpose. Thank you very much.